Welcome to the second part of my animation course. Today we're still gonna be working with Smart Animate, but this time I want to show you a couple of things that will allow you to go beyond the constraints of Smart Animate. That way we can get a little bit more creative. This is going to be a very simple exercise with a goal to open your mind to some new possibilities, even within the constraints of a design tool.
So a quick use case today, let's just create ourselves a nice looking progress bar in a card. Okay, I'm gonna start with a frame that's the size of an iPhone. And this is also going to be pretty simple, but also pretty cool looking. So I'm gonna start by creating a rectangle basically about that wide, so it's 32 points from every side, and then I'm gonna round the corners a little bit. Now inside that rectangle I'm gonna make and duplicate another rectangle just so that it's 8 points within from every direction. So now we have another rectangle, and I'm gonna make this rectangle wide so that we know that we need to adjust the corner radius to be 12 because that's 20 minus 8. And just above this element, let's just type in loading, because this is going to be a progress bar. And I'm gonna center the text here. And of course, just to make a progress bar is not that difficult, so let's do that part first. I'm gonna duplicate the top rectangle again and then shrink it to be basically a pill shape. We just don't want it to mess up the roundness of the corners, so it can't be smaller than towards this line here in the middle, because as you can see, if I make it smaller, it moves it and breaks out this entire element. And now let's create a gradient for our progress. I'm gonna go with a linear gradient, make sure that it's fully opaque and that it's horizontal from one side to the other. And let's pick a blue first, then for the other color let's pick something on the other side of the spectrum, and then in the middle we're gonna have a couple more colors. That happens automatically, but we can tweak them a little bit if we want. And let's make this a tiny bit diagonal. Okay, but that's not all. That's not all we're doing here. So the next step would be to duplicate the rectangle that we have right now at the very back and then simply move it underneath. And now we want the exact same gradient that we have here. So I'm gonna copy the properties and paste the properties onto that other rectangle. And we have ourselves a gradient. But this time I'm gonna go with a radial gradient instead of linear and just make it a little bit more like this. So it's still a gradient that starts with one color mostly on one side and then ends with the other one like that. You can drag it out as well if you want. Now let's go to effects and add a layer blur to it. And let's make this layer blur really heavy. Like this. And I'm gonna call this shadow. And I'm gonna move that shadow underneath our main element. And we can decrease the size of it a little bit. And now we can change the background of the whole element to white, like that. Okay, let's grab everything and kind of sort of center it vertically. And also, of course, we don't want a fully black color here, so I'm gonna go with one of our colors and then simply decrease the saturation and the lightness, so it's a darker shade of the color that we already have. Now this doesn't have to be that visible, it looks a lot better this way. And now let's start animating. So I'm gonna make the second frame, and in that second frame our progress bar is going to be full. But that's a pretty easy animation, that's just changing the shape's size. So we want to do something else here entirely. For this part, I'm gonna go into the gradient of the shadow on the second screen and I'm gonna reverse the colors completely. And then we can actually make this a little bit larger as it approaches the full progress. Just make sure that it's more towards the bottom, so more of the shadow is visible at the bottom because that makes it more natural. Okay, and now let's animate it and see what happens. I'm gonna go to prototype, connect the first one to the second one, then the second one back to the first one, and let's leave it on click because we'll be able to see what happens. So it's gonna navigate to the next frame or to the previous frame. It's gonna be Smart Animate, but we want it to be a little bit slower. So I'm gonna go with 10,000 milliseconds. And then on the other frame as well, it's gonna be on click, Smart Animate, and also 10,000. So when we run it, what should happen is that this element will start growing towards the end, and then the background blur is going to be rising a little bit and also rotating and reversing the colors, and it should look pretty cool in the background there. So we're on the first frame, let me click here and let's see what happens. Yeah, really nice. It's a very subtle and soft and nice animation, and if you think that the gradient in here is too strong, we can go back and actually modify it to remove all the colors that we have in between. That way it's gonna be a little bit smoother, and then we can also bring the second color closer to the first one like this. And then we can copy the properties of this element and paste them onto the second one. So it's gonna be a little bit more subtle. And also, if you think that this whole thing is a little bit too thick, we can also just make it thinner like that. But in that case, we also need to make that shadow itself thinner too. Okay, let's preview it. Okay, clicking now and let's see what happens. And yeah, the gradient in the background is growing and moving and changing the colors a little bit, and then the progress is going from left to right. And if I click again, it's gonna go back. This is to show you that you can get more creative with these animations. You can use things like even rotation of the gradient and then blur it and see what happens. So explore different shapes, different sizes. We can still make this a tiny bit more interesting by moving the element once to the right by 10 points, then moving this element by 10 points as well, and decreasing the size of it by 10 points too. And then we can grab the one inside because we don't need it anymore and remove it. So the idea is that this progress bar is actually a little bit smaller when it starts, and it kind of expands both ways. So now let's just kind of shrink the shadow a tiny bit as well. Okay, let's click and see what happens. Yep, that's a lot more interesting. But let's make it even more interesting, shall we? Let's go over here, and I'm gonna create a new mask that's the same size as this object here. Also, it will be 32 points, and I'm gonna paste it onto the second one as well. We want that mask to expand too. And now what I want to do is to create a new oval, make it fully white, and actually just so it's visible, I'm gonna drag it outside, go to effects, go to layer blur again, and add a pretty heavy blur. Like this. Now what we want to do is place that element on top of our mask and simply use as mask. That way we'll have a little bit of a glow here. Actually, I'm gonna remove that one and simply grab our newly created mask group and paste it onto the second one. But of course, we need to enlarge it a little bit to match the shape. So just gonna drag it and then make sure that everything is perfect, like this. Okay, now this element is going to be moved a little bit further away. Almost like outside of the screen. And then on this side, I'm gonna move it to the other side, but I'm gonna move it faster. So it's basically gonna move further in the same time. That will create an illusion that the progress bar is moving at a different pace than this element is. And then for the blending mode, I'm gonna go with overlay on both sides here. So on the first one, I'm gonna go with overlay as well. And now let's preview it. Okay, let's click to start, and as you can see, there is a shifting gradient color on top of our element, and we can do even more with that in a minute. But that looks so cool, that looks so much more interesting than if it was just a progress bar going from left to right. So I'm gonna go into our first element, duplicate that ellipse again, but this time move it even further back. Then duplicate it over here, but this time move it to the end, so it actually starts slower but then picks up speed. And we can also make it shrink a little bit, and then on the first one we can make it a lot bigger. And now let's see what happens, because we're just being creative, exploring new things, and it's really awesome. And you can actually create more of these to create a typical progress bar that's actually has a lot of different moving parts inside. But I'm gonna bring this a little bit closer now. And let's preview it again. This is really cool and also really interesting because everybody else would just go left to right, right to left, and that's it. And we're shifting gradient colors on top of other gradients, and everything is just nice and unique here. You can also try things like decreasing the layer blur on the go here. So as this element moves, we're decreasing the layer blur and just leaving a tiny bit of that lighter color sticking out. And then when I preview it, we should be able to actually see it happen in real time. Yeah, it's really cool. And it's showing us a lot more creative applications of what we can do with just a simple state A to state B transition by moving the elements outside of the frame, because of course if we start everything in the same spot and end in the same spot, it's gonna be going at the same pace. But if we drag one of the ellipses further back and then it ends further back on the other side, that means that basically in that transition it's going to be going faster, and we can use that. Yeah, nice shifting gradient. And there's so much more that you can do with this, it's mind-blowing.
And that's it for today. If you want me to continue doing these animation tutorials within this whole animation course, like, comment and share the video so more people can see it, and obviously, have a beautiful day.